I was always creative. I wanted new ideas. I wanted to solve problems. I was probably 10 or 12 years old. There was something I wanted, a mountain bike or something that I wanted. If it's $150, how am I going to get it? Growing up as an entrepreneur was a challenge, although I didn't know I was an entrepreneur at a young age. I was terrible in school, first of all. And I remember being at a young age, my mom would tell me that I used to frustrate my teachers because I'd always ask why. All right, we're gonna read this book. Excuse me, why are we reading this book? And it used to frustrate me because I'm like, everything had to have a meaning to me. What was the reason we were doing this? I remember learning math in school. First of all, I was terrible at it. I was terrible at reading, probably have some learning disability that I was never diagnosed with. And I'm doing this math, and I remember thinking to myself, when am I ever going to use this? How am I ever going to use this in life? Again, I don't even know where I learned this. It's just inherent. I'm like, I need to exchange something of value with people so I can get money so I could go buy this bike. And I remember I had a massive baseball card collection. And one summer day, my grandmother was selling a few things out front. I remember I set up a little card table and I had all these baseball cards and I had boxes below. I had all these baseball cards out on this table. And I made a little bit of money. And I remember I wanted this bike so bad. And this is how little I knew about value in exchange for profit. I had this baseball card collection. And I remember this older gentleman came up and he saw some of the cards I had. And I had some pretty valuable cards. I didn't understand how to go get them appraised and how to get the value. I remember this guy walking up, and thank goodness, but he was looking at these cards and he said, "Son, do you know how much that card is worth?" I have no idea. Money relative to me at that age meant nothing. And I'm like, "Are you interested in buying it?" He's like, "Well, what are you asking for it?" And I probably threw out some ridiculous number like $30. Probably back at that time, that card was worth probably $200 or $300. If I had sold that one card to him, I would have been able to pay for my bike. But I had no idea, no concept. Fortunately, he didn't buy that card because he told me it was worth way more. And later I did the same thing again. I traded a bunch of cards and sold some to some friends to get the final money that I needed. And I remember years later learning how much that card was worth, one of these cards, and realizing I probably sold that card for probably 10% of what it was worth. And I was so frustrated. But what a lesson to learn as an entrepreneur early. So I figured out how to raise enough money, how to exchange enough value to get what I wanted. And that was just the process early on of growing up as an entrepreneur. I remember my mind would work differently. And if you've ever done these kinds of things, you're probably an entrepreneur. You might be an entrepreneur if you walk into a restaurant and you start to do sort of mental math in your mind of the number of people in the restaurant to the number of employees they have. And I'm like, there are 10 people working here and there's only 5 people eating. They can't be making money. And just my mind would work in those kinds of ways. I made little widgets and little products. I tried to do this or sell that. I remember my mom made some stuff, some jewelry or some shirts or things she wanted to sell, and I would help. Any way I could try to make money and do that as an entrepreneur to solve problems, I would do that. Later, when I was in high school, I met somebody who her parents owned a ball cap hat company. And I went out there one time to see the facility, and there was just this big warehouse with all these hats. And I remember as I was walking through, he's like, "Hey, if you want one, go ahead and grab one." And so I grabbed it, one or two. And I remember him explaining to me, I said, "What do I owe you for?" He's like, "It's $5. I'm like, "$5? These hats are like $25 at the store." He's like, "Yeah, but it only costs us $5. So if you just grab whatever you want for $5, you can have it." So I grab a couple, I pay him. I remember going back to school and wearing them or being out, and my friends were like, "Where'd you get that hat?" And realizing these hats hadn't even hit the stores yet, the ones that I had. And they wanted them. And so I went back out to this facility and I started talking to this guy, and he's like, "Yeah, if you want to sell hats to your friends, you can buy them for me for $5. Obviously, I'm not moving a ton of hats like stores, but it was a great lesson. I learned cost, I learned margin. He's like, "The only thing you can't do is you can't sell them for more than $25 because that's what they sell in the stores." So I had this idea. I was like, my friends want these hats. So I went and I got me a cardboard box, and I went and I got all the hats I could get that I felt would be the most popular in different sizes and all this stuff. Everybody in school had these lockers. They had these things where their books were filed in. I had these hooks where I had hats hanging in my locker. In between classes, I would have people coming up and I would sell these hats for like $15 or $20. I would make $10 to $15 on every hat. So I'm sitting in school one day realizing I'm in math class and I'm like, okay, just at the break between classes, I just made $30. Like, this is insane. I'm sitting in class, I just made $30 a break. I go to lunch, I made another $30. And kids started buying 2, 3, 4 hats at a time. And I'm going and getting more and putting them in a box and selling them. And it was awesome. It was a great thing until the school found out. I think they wanted a cut. They're like, "You can't sell these hats in here anymore." So what I did is I put them in the trunk of my car, and in between school and football practice, or in between school and track practice, whatever I was doing, whatever sport, I was dealing hats out of my trunk. That happened for a couple of weeks until I was basically out of hats. And I made a ton of money in a short little run. And I realized, I was like, as long as I have some product or service of value, I could get it at a low enough cost. I learned this idea of margin. And so it was the first real, like truly real piece of me that was like, I loved that idea. I loved the concept of it. And it really started coming out that entrepreneurial mind, just as simple as a hat, an exchanging of value to give to somebody else. They loved it because they got these new hats before anyone else could get them. They were awesome. They loved them. And they were happy to exchange the dollars with me. So what I really took from that experience growing up is that I really wanted to be an entrepreneur, sitting in school, not understanding the why. Yes, I learned things, but I couldn't make the connection of why the things I was learning was going to matter to me in the future. That if everything they were telling me was so that I could go get a job to make money, yet I'm just made money sitting in school, probably more than that teacher that day made for that day. I'm like, what? This didn't compute with me. It didn't make sense. And so I've always struggled with traditional educational path. I realized I could go in and I could add valuable services and exchange it for profit. That's what led me to this path of being an entrepreneur. I've always been an entrepreneur my entire life. I remember years ago when people would ask what I did, I'm like, I'm an entrepreneur. Today, that's really cool. 20 years ago, that meant like you're unemployable. No, but you can't work for anyone. And so it wasn't cool to say 20 years ago. Now it's like, I'm an entrepreneur. It's an important thing. I personally think being an entrepreneur is a valuable and respectable thing. There's some people that think sales and business is not. I think it's great. If you relate to this and you like this story, I'd love to hear yours. Go ahead and put your story in the comments. If you like this video, click like, subscribe, share it out with somebody else who's an entrepreneur, and let's share our stories here.